Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining me in studying this week's Torah portion. This year, as happens several times, is a combined reading of two portions to one, Tazria and Metzorah. And that's going to be the topic of our discussion. Today, we will discuss the name of the portions. Let me read it. First, I do think that the reading is self-explanatory. I'm reading from the book Selections from Likutei Sichos, the first stock of Tazria Metzorah. Says the Rebbe, in most years, that is, all years that are not leap years, majority out of 19-year cycle, only 7 are leap years. So you have 12 that are not leap, like this year, and 7 that are. So every third year, on average, is a leap year. This year it's not. So the parshiyot, the portions of Tazria and Metzorah are joined together. The connection between these two parshiyot is obvious. First, so the reason we combine those two is obvious for a good reason. Why? Says the Rebbe. First, both parshiyot focus on tzara'at blemishes. In both, you talk about tzara'at. What is tzara'at? A discoloration. It's usually people call it leprosy, but it's not leprosy because it's not contagious. It's miraculous, and the colors are very specific. They must be on the body, for example, only white. On the garments, it must be on leather. It cannot be on wool. It cannot be on synthetic, on polyester. So it's not about leprosy, but we're going to use the word either discoloration or leprosy, or better say tzara'at. Both portions deal with this disease. Parshas Tazria, the first portion, describe those that appear in a person's flesh or on his clothes, while Parshas Metzorah describe those that appear on walls of buildings. So there are 3 categories of tzara'at, of lesions: 1 on the garments, 2 on the skin, 3 on the homes. Tazria is on the body and on the garments, and Metzorah is on the homes. So we see a connection because it's under the same category. In addition, Parshat Metzorah concludes the description of the concepts mentioned in Parshas Tazria, namely, Parshas Tazria describes the law applying to the identification and conduct of a person afflicted by tzara'at, while Parshas Metzorah describes the process of his purification on the day that he is purified. Another connection between the two is in Tazria, you talk about what defines tzara'at: color, sizes, growth, shrinking, and what he has to do, he or she, if they are afflicted with tzara'at. Metzorah talks about the day that he is purified. How does the process of purification happen? So again, it's a continuation of the same topic. Nevertheless, says the Rebbe, clarification is necessary regarding the names of these Torah readings. As mentioned on numerous occasions, the names of the parshiyot, of the portions, are not merely titles, that is, words chosen from the beginning of the Torah reading and used solely to differentiate one Torah reading from another. Instead, the name of every Torah reading, like all the names with which entities are referred to in the Holy Tongue, embodies and expresses the fundamental theme of that Torah reading. What the rabbi said, in Hebrew, a name is not just chosen to differentiate it from something else. So therefore, we picked up a name out of convenience. If we name a portion in a certain way, it is because the name will tell you the content or the theme of that portion. Says the Rebbe, that's why this is underscored by the Jewish custom that refers to this Torah reading by the name of Tazria, meaning conceives, rather than Isha, woman. Even though Isha is the first word following the opening verse, God spoke to Moshe saying, says the Rebbe, if it was all about just a title to differentiate, there is another important word that appears before the word Tazria, and that is Isha. Vaidaber Hashem el Moshe lemor cannot be chosen because it appears many big openings of portions. So the first word that after that is Isha. Let it be called Isha. Yet it's not called Isha, but it says Isha ki Tazria, a woman when she conceives. So conceives, Tazria is conceives, is the name of the portion. Ask the Rebbe. It is necessary to understand the connection between the name Tazria and the Torah reading as a whole. Why was this word chosen as its name when almost the entire content of the Torah reading concerns tzara'at blemishes? Furthermore, in other words, says Rabbi, the beginning of the portion talks about a woman conceives and gave birth. She will be impure for 7 days or 14 days, male or female, and at the 8th day, the boy have to have circumcision. Right after that, we talk about tzara'at for the rest of the portion. Why do you name this week's Torah portion, which main theme is based on the name, which is tzara'at, where and you name it Tazria, which is conceiving? Furthermore, the Rebbe says it goes even further. This question. Not only does Tazria not relate to tzara'at blemishes, the word of the chosen to name the portion, which is Tazria, conceive, not only it's not at the same theme, it seemingly conveys the very opposite theme, as reflected by the verse, when a woman conceives and she gives birth. Tazria is connected with birth, that is, with bringing new life into being. By contrast, tzara'at blemishes have the opposite connotation. As our sages say, a person afflicted with tzara'at is considered as if dead. It is not merely that this impurity resembles that engendered by corpse, but rather the afflicted person himself is considered as if dead. Says Rabbi, I don't understand. The word Tazria is to conceive, and conceive leads to a new life, a birth of a child. That's creating a life. What is tzara'at all about? An affliction of a person to render that person as if he's dead. The worst kind of affliction. And it's the opposite of bringing new life. It's about the end of life. The rabbis tell us that a tzarua, a man afflicted with tzara'at, is considered like a dead person. Yet, the Torah portion that discusses most of the leprosy, tzara'at, is called Tazria, which is conceived and bringing life into being. Similarly, says the Rebbe, so that's the first portion, Tazria. Similarly, the choice of the term Metzorah as the name of the Torah reading requires clarification. So the same is about the second portion we read, Metzorah. That Torah reading does not describe the tzara'at affliction, the type of blemishes that brings about the Metzorah's impurity, but the opposite, the purification of a person with that affliction. How he ceases to be classified as a Metzorah, enabling him to enter the camp of the Jewish people and bring the required sacrifices. Why then is the Torah reading called Metzorah, a name that refers to the afflicted person rather than his purification? Says, I don't understand. Metzorah means someone who's afflicted with tzara'at. You know what the Torah portion of Metzorah talks about? Purification, to get out of it. Zot tiyeh Torah HaMetzorah beyom taharato, the day he is purified. That's the beginning, and that's everything the Torah portion is talking about. So we're not talking about tzara'at, we're talking about getting out of tzara'at, purifying and returning back to resuming normal life. Says the Rebbe, I don't understand why the entire portion is called Metzorah. Metzorah is as the connotation of someone who has leprosy, who's considered like he's dead. And all that we talk about is the opposite, how he returns back to the Jewish community.
Why is it bringing up Metzorah here when we're talking about Tazria?
Because it's a combination of two portions. This week we read the both portions, Tazria and Metzorah. So the name of the portion is not Tazria, Tazria Metzorah. And therefore, says Rabbi, let's look at the section of Tazria. Tazria is conceive and bring life, and all it talks is about tzara'at, which is considered like dead. Second portion is called Metzorah. Metzorah means someone who is considered like dead. And all you talk about is how he's resuming life and coming back from that state. The Rebbe says, that even though in Metzorah it does discuss tzara'at and the homes, says the Rebbe, but the word Metzorah does not apply on the homes. It applies only on humans. And therefore, the word Metzorah cannot apply to that leprosy that appears at home. The second point, the Rebbe says, the tzara'at on homes is a blessing. As we all know, that Rashi says that the reason God makes these colors appear on walls is because the Amorites or the Canaanites or the non-Jews, before they flee from the Holy Land, they hid their treasures underground. God brings a change of color on the walls, so the man is told by the Kohen that it's impure and he has to knock down the house, and then he's covered the treasures. So in other words, the tzara'at of homes is on a category of its own. First, it's not called tzara'at. Metzorah does apply only to a human, not to an object. And number two, it is a blessing. And Metzorah, the Torah is talking about, is about a punishment that the person is considered, like he said. Therefore, says the Rebbe, the question comes back, why is it called Metzorah? And the last question that I was asking, I don't know if we'll have time to address that. Another point requires clarification, 166. This Torah reading has two names, Metzorah. Jewish custom refers to it as Metzorah, and Tur and Shulchan Aruch use that name. However, says the Rabbi, Rav Saadia Gaon, Rashi, and Rambam refer to it as Zos Tihiyeh, meaning this shall be. What is the reason for the difference between these two approaches? Says the Rebbe, this is one of the very, very few times where the name of the portion is different based on different commentators, sages. Rashi and Tur and Shulchan Aruch called it Metzorah, as you would see on top of the Chumash, Metzorah. But that portion in, where else, Rambam, Rav Saadia Gaon, and Rashi, all three calls it Zot Tihiyeh. These are the words that precede Metzorah, Zot Tihiyeh Torah Metzorah. Therefore, they do not use the word Metzorah because Metzorah is a negative word. Tazria means conceive as a blessing, to start a life. Metzorah is about someone who is considered like dead. Therefore, they don't use that word. How come today we use that word? That's the Rebbe's question. Here is the Rebbe's answer. So again, we have a question on Tazria. Tazria is all, the main theme is tzara'at, which a person is considered like he's dead, yet we call the portion Tazria, which is conceived to start a life. How is it possible? Metzorah is all about a person who's considered like he's dead, and the portion, all it does is deal with the purification of a Metzorah and returning back to normal, resuming normal life, and living like everybody else. Even though it discusses the affliction on homes, the word Metzorah does not apply to homes, only to humans, number one. Number two, the affliction on homes actually was a blessing and not about as a punishment for misconduct. And therefore, and then the third question that I was asking, how come Rashi, Rambam, and Rav Saadia Gaon call it Zot Tihiyeh? Only Tur and Shulchan Aruch call it Metzorah. Why is there a difference in the name? Some call it Metzorah, some call it Zot Tihiyeh. Can we move to the answer? Because to me, the answer is more exciting than the questions. Here is the Rebbe's answer. It is possible to offer the following explanation of the above. As a preface, says the Rebbe, and I do want to read the preface because I think it's a fundamental preface, so we need to understand. In other words, the Rebbe says, let's introduce the answer with prefacing something that's very vital. One of the fundamental principles of our faith is the concept of reward and punishment. As Rambam Maimonides writes in his commentary to the Mishnah, the 11 fundamental principles, there are 13 fundamental principles that every Jew must accept without deviation. One of them is the number 11, that God grants a reward to a person who fulfills the mitzvot of the Torah and punishes one who violates its prohibitions. The greatest reward is receiving a portion in the world to come, And the most severe punishment is karet, the soul being cut off and not receiving such portion. Says the Rambam, there has to be a reward and punishment in our life. Those who serve God and obey the mitzvot get rewarded. Those who disobey God get punishment. Says the Rebbe, says the Rambam, what's the ultimate reward? It's not a good lottery ticket. It is a portion in the world to come. What's the ultimate punishment? Correct, to be cut off from the world to come. That's Rambam. Rambam further elaborates on these concepts in his text, Mishnah Torah, in Ilchot Teshuvah, in the laws of Teshuvah. He says the following, that the Torah is a Torah of kindness. Accordingly, it is understood that even the penalties mandated by the Torah were not ordained solely for the sake of punishment, but rather to rectify the sinner's soul, as reflected by our sage's statement, those who are liable for karet, but to receive lashes are exempt from karet. Similar, do you understand what I'm saying? Rambam says that whenever the Torah tells us punishment, a man should be punished. Punishment is not out of revenge, not out of anger, not out of losing his mind, acting from his heart, but rather it is a great reward, as a great benefit for the human, because with a small punishment he is spared a much, much greater consequence. So therefore, for example, to be cut off, karet, if someone receives lashes, he is returning back to God. So if you are to ask someone, you want to get lashes, which is a one time, or be cut off forever, of course, everybody would say, with a sane mindset, he would say, of course I want lashes. That's why we don't have lashes today. People say, oh, God, thank God we don't have it. They don't realize that this is a reward that a person should be looking forward to atone and make up for all the sins.
There's a whole other group of people.
Similar concept, I didn't hear. Similar concepts apply regarding the punishment of execution by the court. Thus, regarding Yehoshua's statement prior to the execution of Achan disobeyed God and broke 13 vows. And Yehoshua asked him to admit to his crimes. He admitted, and Yehoshua stoned him to death. Yehoshua turned to him and says, may God darken you this day. And our sages comment in the Talmud, I'm pretty sure it's a Talmud, the Mishnah, it's not Talmud, it's not Gemara, it's Mishnah. May God darken you may God darken you this day. Our sages comment, and this day you will be darkened, but you will not be darkened in the world to come. You are atoned for all your misdeeds, and you go into the world to come. Why? The execution has redeemed that person from all the evil he caused and all the anger he caused God and the Jewish people. So we see from here, even though there is the concept of reward and punishment, and it's a fundamental in Judaism, yet the reason for punishment is not to hurt. It's not evil on its own. There is no such thing. It is for the benefit of the person, of the sinner, to cleanse the person and bring him back to the previous state. Says the Rebbe, at the conclusion of Ilchot tzara'at, Rambam writes, at the conclusion of the law that he's talking about tzara'at, the leprosy that we're talking about, Rambam writes, this change mentioned above that affects clothes and houses, to which the Torah referred with the general term of tzara'at, is not a natural occurrence. Instead, it is a sign and a marvel that existed among the Jewish people to warn them against lashon hara, malicious gossip. Says Rambam, the reason people get afflicted with tzara'at is not because they had mold, because there was a hurricane and they didn't see the sunlight that garment. It is a miracle that afflicted only the Jewish people, and it happened as a sign for misbehaving in lashon hara, in gossip and slander. And therefore the person is afflicted first with the homes, then the garments, then the body. We all know that, right? when a person speaks lashon hara, the walls of his house change color. If he repents, the house will be purified. If, however, he persists in his wickedness until the house is destroyed, the leather implements in his house changes color, all the garments. If he persists in his wickedness until the Torah requires that they be burned, the clothes he wears change color. If he repents, they will be purified. If he persists in his wickedness until the Torah requires that they be burned, his skin undergoes changes and he develops tzara'at. This causes him to be isolated and for it to be made known that he must remain alone so that he will not be involved in the talk of the wicked, which is characterized by mockery and lashon hara. Did you understand what it says here? There is stages in which God is sending our reminders. One reminder, after a reminder. Remember the story about the guy in a flood that he says, God says, if I'm a tzaddik, God will save me, and therefore he doesn't have to leave his house. Are you familiar with that? There was a man, a righteous man, who always did the right thing. And he knew that God, it says, God will chesed yisoveveni, God will always protects me. A flood came and there was announcements of mandatory evacuation because the siesta key is coming up for the surge is going to be 5 feet. And he says, I'm sorry, God is protecting me. They kept knocking on his door. The forces of saving came to his door and he says, I'm sorry, I'm not leaving unless you carry me against my will. And they tried to convince him to talk him into the water professional. Didn't help. He says, God is going to protect me. Well, the water kept surging and surging, and the guy climbs to the roof, and they send a boat. A boat is going around, and the guy is sitting on the roof, and he says, I'm not coming. God is protecting me. You see, I'm alive. Then they send a helicopter, and he refused, and then he dies. He has a complaint to God. If I'm righteous, how come you're not saving me? And God says, I send it through the internet, then I send it to the police, then I send it to the board, then I send it to the helicopter, and you're an action. You're a stubborn man. What did you want me to come myself and pick you up? The same is about tzara'at. God is sending it to the homes. If it helps, great. So it will be cured. If it didn't help, what happens? It goes to his garments, closer to him. If it helps, great. If it didn't, it comes to his skin. If it didn't help, he didn't stop, what do we say to him? You don't belong to be around people. Go away. Stay by yourself. Why? So you can reflect on your conduct and say to yourself, do I use my power of speech to connect with people and people, or to deviate or to break apart relationship? That's the way it works. In other words, says the Rebbe, Rambam is saying that God brings about a unique change in the natural order. Why? To warn the Jewish people against lashon hara. Therefore, the order is that God first brings about the change in the walls of the buildings, then in garments, so that the Jews will be warned. The signs begin with a lesser situation and proceed to one that is more severe, so that they take heed and guard against lashon hara. Also, says the Rebbe, the confinement which a person afflicted with tzara'at must undergo has a positive purpose. So in other words, the process is very positive because it's all about getting you to behave, to conduct yourself. And that's why it goes in stages. In the actual seclusion outside is also positive. Why? It is prescribed that he must be isolated and it be made known that he must remain alone and that he shall dwell alone outside the camp where he lives. These measures were enacted with the purpose that he will not be involved in the talk of the wicked, which is characterized by mockery and lashon hara. Says Rabbi, that's why he goes out of the community. He can't be with his wife and children. He can't be with his Facebook and internet. He has to be by himself. Take a book of Psalms, study Torah portion, and go over your conduct so that hopefully God will listen to you teshuva and allow you to return.
You can't even be in another song.
Let's find out. We're not sure about that. Says the Rebbe, Now comes the answer. So far is a preface, is an introduction to the idea of punishment and reward. So what did we learn? Punishment and reward is number 11, is 11th fundamental of Rambam. Number 2, punishment is not a revenge or taking out my anger at someone, but rather it is for the benefit of the person. Just like every other punishment of Torah. It's particularly expressed in the tzara'at because it goes in stages. When it comes to lashes or execution, it's a one-time deal. There is no warning. You don't tell someone, if you violate it, you first time, second offense, third time, we're going to execute you. No, it's the first time. Lashes is the same thing. We don't give him a warning. We give him lashes. Either he gets lashes or not. Tzara'at, it comes to the homes, then to the governments, then, in other words, it's a greatest act of kindness. Did you understand that?
Yeah.
Now, says the Rebbe, now we can understand the answer to the question. It can be said that the Torah reading is named Tazria. Tazria is to conceive, to start a life, for this reason. As stated in section 1 above, the term Tazria is the beginning of the conception of new life, like sowing the seed of grain or fruit, which results in new growth. The word Tazria, conceive, means to start something new. As we say in Birkat Hamazon, Azorim bedima berina iktsoiru. Those who plant with tears in their eyes because they pray to God to send rain, berina, with great joy, iktsoru, they will harvest. Zorea, zria, is to plant. In a human, to tazria means she conceived. There is a connection. This is also the intent of the tzara'at blemishes described in Parshas Tazria. Says Rabbi, the whole theme of tzara'at is all about to conceive new life. Both the tzara'at blemish itself and the confinement that afflicted person must undergo, that he be isolated and be made known, that he must remain alone, are not only punishments and undesirable factors that the afflicted person must bear, but they are elements and means to correct and heal him, enabling him to enter a new lifestyle in which he will have no connection with the talk of the wicked that is characterized by mockery and lashon hara. Says the Rebbe, the whole idea of tzara'at and the process of purification to be away is to create a new life, to make you a mensch. Until now you are a behemoth, you acted like an evil human, and now God is sending you away. You know why? He cares about you. He wants you to start something new. That's why it's named Tazria. Since the purpose of the Torah is to serve as an instruction, hara, it follows that the passage regarding tzara'at blemishes teaches a lesson regarding all the punishments mandated by Torah. That is, that they serve as a unique divine acts to lead an improvement in a Jew's conduct, causing him or her to follow the upright path. Says the Rebbe, that's why we call it Tazria. This is an example for the entire Torah. Every time God says, I will be angry with you, I'll punish you, I'll throw you away from the land, it is because God wants to improve us, to make us better. Now the rabbi is going to continue. Why tzara'at was chosen from all punishments? Says the Rebbe, because this is a most severe state of a human. To be considered like dead, there is no greater punishment. There is no harsher punishment than to tell someone you're not alive. Therefore, this serves as a sign, as an example for all other punishments, because all other punishments are far less severe than this type of punishment. Did you understand that? Now, says the Rebbe, that will explain another part before we go to Metzorah. The Torah says, Badad Yeshev, that he must be secluded by himself in his tent outside the camp. Outside the camp. Says the Rebbe, is he allowed to sit outside the camp with somebody else or not? Another Metzorah. Is he allowed to? Well, if you read the Haftarah, there were 4 Metzorah, Gehazi and his 3 sons. And in the Talmud, Vahev Besufa, there is a story of two Mitzoraim who saw the miracles that happened about God bringing two mountains to kill all the enemies that tried to kill the Jewish people. So we do see that Metzorah sometimes can stay outside the camp with somebody else. Says the Rebbe, if Metzorah is a process of purification, like all other purifying people, like someone who came in contact with a dead corpse, or someone who had a discharge, then perhaps he can live with somebody else, with other people. But if it is all about improving the person's character, then he shouldn't be with people like him, because you want him to be as far as possible from that surrounding. Says the Rebbe that it will affect Jewish law, because the Torah says that he has to live outside the camp. But when there is no camp, we are now not in a situation where the Jewish camp. At the time of the temple in the desert, there was a camp, Kohanim camp means encampment, a section, then the Levi outside, and then you have the Israelite. The Torah says you're not allowed to be in the Kohanim, not Levi, not Israelite, but outside. Someone with a discharge is not allowed to be out inside the Kohanim camp, but he's allowed Levi and Israelite. Someone who came in a dead corpse can be in the Israelite camp. Metzorah has to be all outside all three. What if you don't have a camp? Are you allowed to be around other people or not? Says the Rebbe, if it is considered like any other impurity, then there is no camp. You have no place to stay outside. You can be among others. But if the idea of Metzorah is to purify by making you a new person, by conceiving new life, and therefore God says stay away so you can reflect on your past and create a new start, then even if there is no camp, stay away from other Jewish people, and definitely stay away from other Metzoraim. By the way, the idea of staying away or being by himself or with others is a debate. It's there are two opinions. Some say he's allowed to, some say he's not allowed to. And the Metzorah,
In the desert, was it 2,000 animals had to be away from, or just outside?
Outside, for Amma. Did you understand so far? Do I have to summarize? No? Good. Now says the Rebbe, let's talk about Metzorah. Says the Rebbe.
What page are you on?
You're gonna have to jump in. Tell us the story. We've only got 7 minutes.
No, we're going to get
I haven't gotten that far into it.
But under mystical understanding, change formations.
Well,
Is that what you're looking for?
what the Rebbe is going to say the following. Yeah. Says the Rebbe, the whole idea, the sages tell us, the Alter Rebbe in Likutei Torah writes, that a Metzorah is a great blessing on a human, because the tzara'at, the leprosy, is on the outer part layer of the human. It's only on the skin. It is reflecting what's going on inside, and God is choosing the most outer layer to share with you and to indicate that you need a repair. It's only someone who has cleansed himself and rid himself of all evil and all negativity, and only one aspect needs to be fixed. And that's why it starts from the very outer aspect of a human, which is the shelter, the home. Then it didn't help it, the garments, then the skin, but it's not internally. That will be only very special people who are merited to have tzara'at, because in every other area of their life, they're perfect. That's why we don't have tzara'at today. That's why, who was afflicted with tzara'at? Miriam, in the Torah, because she was so holy, she was a prophetess. In fact, says the Rebbe, Mashiach is described in the Talmud, Metzorah. He's called Metzorah. He will be afflicted with leprosy. Says the Rebbe, because the idea of tzara'at is all about an indication how holy the person is. That all that's left, all that there is a very external component. In his thought, in his heart, he is perfect. In his deeds, in his action, is good. All he needs to do is keep his mouth shut.
What happened
And
to
not,
what's
that's the only part.
That's the biggest part.
But other than that, he's perfect. He keeps Shabbat properly and celebrate holidays
So
and he
it's
gives
one sin.
tzedakah.
There was one sin, everything's perfect.
But
except
that,
lashon.
right, says the Rebbe, that's why God is choosing only the external aspect of the human to reflect that, because it's very external and it can be
That's what Miriam did,
fixed.
right? She did lashon.
Right, just a minute. And she meant well, by the way.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Let's continue the thought. That's why says the Rebbe, when do you call the portion Metzorah? When you talk about the purification of Metzorah. To remind us that Metzorah is not an evil curse, it's actually the greatest blessing. It's a sign of great purity, that a person who is afflicted is a very unique, very high spiritually leveled person. Otherwise, he will not be afflicted with that because he has other things to take care of. Therefore, the Torah chose to name the portion Metzorah, only the portion that begins with the process of purifying, to tell us the reason God is making the sign is a great, great blessing. He wants to tell you that everything else is great except one thing. Take care of it and immediately you will be very pure. Says the Rebbe, that's why, now we can understand why, in earlier generations, the Rashak, the Rambam, Rashi, called it Zotiyeh, thus shall be. We, today, too, and Shulchan Aruch calls it Metzorah, because as we advance closer to Mashiach, all the inner impurity we're getting rid of. And all that's left is very external, like a Metzorah. So the name of the Metzorah is about the purification. It's all talking about purifying them, not about the affliction, because it's the greatest blessing. So is the coming of Mashiach. But what the main point, that because we skip more than half of this, the main point is the Rebbe wants to tell us that whenever God is bringing a calamity, a difficulty, a challenge, communally or globally or individually, we need to see, just like punishments by God, are for a purpose, purification, for the benefit of the person, either a reminder or cause the person to change. And therefore, we call the purification process, we call it Metzorah, because the whole idea is about purification. Yes, Harry.
Moshe, don't kind of leprosy when God told.
Right.
That was instantaneous. What was the point of that?
So again, he was pure in all his thought, speech, and action, except when he spoke in disrespectful about the Jewish people, and God says to him, how dare you do it?
Yeah.
So Moshe had tzara'at, but Moshe's tzara'at is not the classical tzara'at because it was cured immediately. But Miriam, she had to stay away for 7 days. So again, that's why the portion of Tazria is called Tazria, because it's about conceiving new life. The whole idea of tzara'at, to conceive a new life, to change. As Rambam writes, that the idea of punishment is not to hurt people or take revenge, but rather to help them benefit. And the portion of Metzorah starts all about purifying the Metzorah. Is because the idea of tzara'at is a great blessing. It happens only to holy people who have very little to correct, and it's all external. Therefore, you talk about the purification because it causes a person to be complete and perfect. So now we understand the connection between the two portions, and that's why if we need to combine several portions of the Torah, this is one of those chosen, Tazria Metzorah. Good Shabbos, everybody.
So-